Day 2 of Douglas County budget hearings. We kick off today with our economic development partners, and I see we have folks here from the Chamber-EDC, KUIP, and Peasley. We don't have anybody from Baldwin.
Nope, I don't see anybody from Baldwin.
Okay, great. Cami, are you kicking us off with an
Yes.
overview? All right.
Yes, good morning,
Welcome, everybody.
commissioners. I'm sorry. Good morning, commissioners. I'll introduce our economic development partners that are here today and give you a brief summary of our connections with them. Douglas County invests in the Economic Development Corporation of Lawrence and Douglas County through the Lawrence Chamber of Commerce. The goal of this countywide economic development program is related to the program's 4 strategic initiatives: job creation and economic prosperity, innovation and entrepreneurship, workforce and talent development, and housing and land development. The EDC leverages county funding from funds from the city of Lawrence and substantial investment from private sector to further economic development and opportunities in Douglas County. They have 2 supplemental requests for your consideration: $30,000 in operational support and $105,000 in revolving loan assistance. The KU Innovation Park, formerly known as BTBC, was created in 2005 collaboratively with the city of Lawrence, KU, and the Lawrence Chamber of Commerce to create, recruit, grow, and retain companies that produce high-quality jobs, mostly in technology and life science industries. In 2021, they transitioned to their current name of KU Innovation Park with the construction beginning of their phase 3 building. KUIP is funded through the city, county, KU, and state-funded grants. In 2021, Douglas County cut the KUIP funding by $50,000. They have 2 supplemental requests, one for the $50,000 restoration to match funding received from the city and KU. KUIP has a 3-year commitment from the city of Lawrence for $75,000 that will be paid annually for phase 4 and was paid annually for phase 3. Their second supplemental request for the county is to commit $75,000 for 3 years, or a total of $225,000. The Baldwin Chamber of Commerce receives $10,000 annually to support the existing economic development efforts through operational expenses, local business development, and continuing economic development education. Peasley Tech, also known as, the Dwayne Peasley Technical Training Center, also known as Peasley Tech, opened as a training facility in August of 2015. It was created by the city, Douglas County, City of Lawrence, Douglas County, the EDC Lawrence Chamber of Commerce, and area industry partners in association with USD 497 to provide technical training in our community to meet the current and emerging needs of our community and employers. Their funding is secured through 4 sources: leasing of space within Peasley Tech, training tuition for apprenticeships, open enrollment, custom courses, gifts and grants, and county funding. That is all.
Okay, so at this point, thank you for being here. We ask questions. Do we have one that commissioners like to start with, maybe?
What's right in front of you, Commissioner? I said, what's right in front of you, Commissioner Lee? I just see that you've got your binder open to something.
I do. I have my binder open to Peasley Tech. And I was just curious about, I know there was an interest in having Peasley Tech be a taxing authority of its own. And then this is that did not pass, I believe, at the state level. I'll come closer. So is this just the funding structure that Peasley has always had? This is both from the county and the city.
Yes, oh, sorry, here's one. Yes, it's the same request for the last several years. We are continuing, our legislation it will continue in the next session. It doesn't have to start over in the process. And so, it's still our goal is that by 2026 budget year, to have that in place as an alternative to the county and city funding.
I had a question about fund balance. So you've got a healthy fund balance going into the year, but there's also a net gain in your budget of about 190,000. Is that intended to kind of, is there a goal that you're trying to boost your fund amount, or what is the purpose of that revenue surplus?
Yeah, the goal is to ensure that we have from 6 to 9 months operating funds. We're currently at 6 months. And so our goal is to get to a 9 months operating fund.
What's that number just roughly? that you're
It's
looking for?
about $1.5 million approximately.
Great, thanks.
Mhm.
Kevin, maybe I'm reading something wrong, but if it's 1.5 and your current budget request shows the fund balance of 2.46 million.
That includes, I think that includes the depreciation on the facility and some other in that budget number. That's not our actual cash in bank.
So I just want to make sure we have accurate. You said this is the same request that has been made year after year of the county. The city's funding has actually changed over the years. Is that correct?
It did change, but then it was restored. So it actually has been the same. It did change last year, but it was restored during the budget year.
But the city's funding has been at 200,000 for the length of time that we have reporting for this.
Yes.
Anything else for Peasley?
Nope.
Okay. Where we would like to go next?
I'll ask a similar question for the Chamber EDC about your unrestricted fund balance of $263. Is that a true reflection of the state of funding, or do you carry something in terms of a fund balance that's not reported here?
That should be a fairly accurate reflection of what the fund balance is. We
Is
try
that-
to stay pretty close.
So is that the EDC as a portion of the chamber, or is this a reflection of the chamber?
Commissioner, can you tell me where you're looking?
Mine is page 5. And I have a 2024 budget request, unrestricted fund balance of $263.
It's this right
I didn't bring my glasses. You're looking at $263,
Yes. As the fund balance.
and your question is
Are there no reserves whatsoever at the EDC and the chamber? Is that,
typically, well, I mean, it's a budget, so we try to get net zero toward the end of each year. And this is the economic development balance in the chamber.
okay.
Does that answer your question?
So the chamber keeps reserve funds. They're just not reflected in the EDC's portion of that budget.
That's correct. We have line item accounting, so each division is separate. And just to go in a bit further, since we receive public funds, it is important at the end of the year to look at that dollar amount and bring it to the beginning balance as of January 1st. With our other divisions, we just zero that out.
I have a question about revolving loans, and I think it's that I don't understand them, so help me here. I would think, my understanding is the request is for an ongoing 100 and a little more, 105. Okay, I was gonna say 107, don't have, I got that number in my head. But 105 every year moving forward. I have one person doing this and one person doing this, so maybe I'm not confused.
I think the plan, Commissioner, is to build the funds up. And we're thinking in the neighborhood of, the original goal was $1 million to, over time, to then become a static fund or a fund that continues to replenish itself through contributions that are coming from the Rising Together campaign, city funds, county funds, to build up a fund of, originally, the goal was $1 million. We're hoping to get at least $500,000. And then the plan is not to have ongoing, forevermore, evergreen kinds of contributions. The idea is to get it to a point where it has enough volume of funds that it can replenish itself. And we're also working with Network Kansas potentially to get some additional funding in this goal of getting to a fund that can be self-sustaining.
I think, Commissioner, we're going yes and no. Is it's 24? Yes. 25, probably yes. 26, possibly yes. But in the end, self-sustaining, as Steve mentioned. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does. Thank you. How did you decide on $1 million?
We had looked at some other funds. There weren't a lot of good examples out there that we felt were reflective, but we thought if you got to $1 million with what we had, at least at that time, anticipated the loan demand to be at the size of loans that we were making, that would be essentially self-replenishing. We recognize that was probably pretty aggressive, at least starting out. And so we backed off with this idea. If we get to 500,000 and maybe, and we're also have had some conversations with the Kauffman Foundation, but the idea is to patch together funds in a way that we can get this to a point that it's not an annual request of the city or county. You know, the city was gracious enough last year to give us 105 to combine with the monies from the Rising Together campaign. And the hope, and we've got a request, as you're aware, of 105,000 to them again, but essentially matched last year's. And so the goal is to try to build up and get to the point that we can be self-sustaining.
Do you, or either of you, do you think you could provide a list of potential funding sources so we can see kind of where the county falls within that, like other sources that you're going to in terms of setting up that fund?
Well, I was going to say just to the additional point, a lot of that was contingent upon the terms of the loans as well as the size of the loans. How many did we want out, and to be able to return with interest in a way that continued to be able to be accessible to potential applicants. So that number from $500,000 to $1 million kind of was modified based on some firm decisions on those terms. So in addition to that, we've got a number of partners that have contributed to the Rising Together campaign. And as we grow, now that it's developed, we have, solid terms, we have marketing programs. We are pursuing other avenues of revenue in order to support and sustain the program. So to the earlier point, we don't see this as an ongoing ask, but an initial ask from the local community as it's developed locally, serving local entrepreneurs, that we get a start there, and then to continue that and replenish it and continue to increase its sustainability, be able to go to lenders who like what we're doing, who see the success as we report that out, and want to contribute in meaningful ways.
I think it's an appropriate ask to come to the county in terms of helping to fund some of that revolving loan. I would like to see kind of the overall structure of who you're expecting to ask that from, and then what percentage is expected to come or is anticipated from like city and county sources. So I'd like to see that kind of spelled out if we can, if is that something you could get to me by Monday?
We should be able to. We have had conversations. We don't have commitments, so nailing down an exact amount may be a little bit difficult, but we certainly have had the conversation.
Yeah, I don't expect that these are all secured funds, but if they're, pending or anticipated requests, I'd like to see that.
We can do that.
So, Josh, I appreciate you highlighting that so many of these answers are dependent on, actual like proof of concept really is what we're talking about, right? And so at the actual application for approval of and servicing of loans. And the way that it's structured right now, maximum amount of loan is 15,000. 4 years is the maximum number of years. So, I mean, the quick math with the amount of money that you have currently is a minimum of 15 loans ish, right? A minimum of 15 loans up to $15,000, could be a lot more than that if there were a collection of smaller ones. So I guess my two-part question to that is, one, have you done any sort of math, or can you maybe, as to sort of an addendum to Commissioner Willie's request, help us understand how the repayment of, let's say you did, just for simple math, 15 loans of 15,000 each, sort of the minimum number of businesses that the loan were to support for 4-year loans. What's the timeline on that money coming back into the loan and replenishing? And is Truity is your one and only financial partner for servicing the loans? Am I understanding that correctly from the narrative?
Yes.
Do they have a maximum, a capacity limit on how many of these loans they can and will service? And what is the cost of that to you? Like, is there a cost to pay the lender to service those loans that because it feels like there probably is, but I'm not really seeing that worked into the budget, or like a line item of what it's going to cost you to pay the lender to service those loans. Is it per loan? Is it a flat fee per year? Do they have a maximum number of loans? I want to understand the mechanisms of it better.
Sure. And I think that's in large part what took a little longer than we anticipated, was weighing all of those options. We had a number of folks offering to do 1% across the board, or a per loan sort of fee. And that's what was appealing about Truity Credit Union's proposal was that they would not charge. It was a part of their service as a credit union and investment in the community to do this loan servicing. While we had all of the applications, the Financial Review Board that would review those, that they would be issuing those loans and servicing those loans in a really extraordinary way. So there's every dollar is going to the entrepreneur.
Okay, that's great to know. I appreciate knowing that about Truity. Second part of that question, have they communicated any capacity, sort of cap on capacity for the amount of additional loans that they can and will service through this particular fund? I just want to know if there's a constraint there, and the realisticness of, if, for example, you got 50 loan applications in your first year and there were 50 approvals, that's pretty ambitious. But I'm just sort of speaking a little bit hyperbolically to understand where the limits are.
Yeah, there had been some conversation about that, but it was more related to the amount of money that would be sitting in an account and the interest that might be accrue in an interest-bearing account, and what that capacity was. But it was less a conversation at all about how many loans. If it were $3,000 to $5,000 loans, that obviously increases the number of loans we could be issuing and approving, but that had not been a concern from either the CFOs from the Truity or in any of our conversations. The number wasn't concerning at all.
Okay, thank you. What about you all and your capacity for the quantity of potential new, I guess, help us understand better. Once a loan is approved by I forget exactly.
The Financial Review.
Thank you,
Mhm.
FRB. We love an acronym. Once it's approved, is it hands off as far as the chamber is concerned, or are you still involved with that business through the lifetime of the loan? Is it hands off for you versus the bank? Obviously is not hands off because it's where
Right.
the loan lives.
Well, and the Truity Credit Union has, that's again, one of the appeals of going with them is what they would do to help coach and support and find ways to accommodate that payback. In the narrative, I hope it was noted that we rely a great deal on the SBDC as a certified program partner to help support and develop a relationship. It's less about issuing money, more about, that's why I termed it a program, because of the relationship that the SBDC develops with folks who walk in that door, and that being the entry point to the loan application process. We hope that any concerns whatsoever can be expressed to the SBDC, and whether the SBDC is able to support whatever those concerns might be in the repayment or ongoing business concerns, then they will be able to do that. If not, then the chamber and I would be able to step in and assist in ways that we can as well. And so everybody is more service oriented, wrap around sort of response to any issues that may come up. So that's an ongoing relationship we intend to develop through networking, educational opportunities, and others as these have plenty of demonstrated record of.
Thanks. That's well, I have a question about SBDC, but I'll pause there if Commissioner Miller, Commissioner Kelly has more questions about the.
Nope, that's what I was going to, so take it away. Okay. So we have another supplemental request, which is partially a restoration of funding from 2019 with a little bit of increase. And that's what I have in the narrative here. In our budget options, it also mentions additional support for the Small Business Development Center. But I can't break out, is that 10,000 of that 30,000? What portion is likely to go to support small business development?
Do you want to take this, Christina?
So I believe our request for the SBDC, we've historically gone through the chamber to request county funds, but $30,000 is what we have requested for 2024.
Okay, so the whole portion of that additional supplemental request of that 30,000 is specifically for the Small Business Development Center.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, thank you. And what does that allow you to do? Okay.
That is, I think we're talking about two different things. So KU Small Business Development Center in 2022 received $20,000, I believe, in 2023, and the request for 2024 is $30,000. So consistent 2024 as in 2023. When the chamber was cut by 10% in, what year was that? 19, we kept them whole as a pass through. So we absorbed the reduction of that 10% and kept them whole.
So 10,000 of the 30,000 would go to them, 20,000 would go to the EDC.
Well, it's the same as what we did in 2023. We kept them at 30,000, even though we were cut in 2019.
So are they asking for more funds or not?
Consistent with last year. Is there?
Okay, so
No
there's
more
no,
funds, but
got
that
it.
would go
All
through
right. Just
us.
want to clarify.
Yeah.
So
question.
it's just a restoration of 30,000.
For the chamber and EDC, right?
Yes,
Yes.
that is not an
Correct.
additional amount on top of that
That's correct.
for the Small Business Development Center.
And I will say that, as Dr. Kelly mentioned, the chamber likes to keep a reserve. That is our goal for economic development monies. We try to get that close to zero because that money doesn't do any good sitting in an account. We want to get that out to the county and help the residents for economic development purposes.
If I could comment on that a little bit, we ask all of our partners to provide fund balance for us for their entire organization. I can't think of another organization that separates out like this is just for this, because that doesn't give us a picture of the health of the organization, which is one of the things that we're looking at. Like I noticed that membership fees weren't included in your budget either. And I think that's because you consider that a separate operation. That's my guess.
Membership events, leadership programs, yes.
Yeah, I would just ask that in the future, we get a projection of what the total fund balance is for the organization, because it's different than what we're getting from everybody. I mean, we're getting I think. I don't know anybody else who does it that way.
Not, I wouldn't.
Yeah.
We have some regional organizations that are.
Yes, what Sarah said is we have some regional organizations, so things like Freedom's Frontier and things like that may have a little different, but that's just my request is that we get a fund balance, not just for economic development activities, but for the entire organization.
So Commissioner, are you looking for the balance would it be helpful to show the balance at the end of the year? What our net revenue was? It's a not-for-profit, so it's not really a P and L.
I think it just, if we could have that spreadsheet filled out for the whole chamber and for EDC, that would be great. Do you know, that it's in your request. So we
And-
see the totality of the chamber. And then is that what, I mean,
Mhm.
that's what we get from other organizations.
Most of our community profit or community partners are nonprofits and they have varying fund balances, but they all have some balance in an account, and that's really clear. So I flagged that in your proposal also, because the 263 number didn't really make sense to me. So I appreciate understanding the difference that you do have different accounts, and it is important to me that we be seeing both of those. And I think I heard you just say, Steve, that which I think is what the spreadsheet reflected too, that like we didn't see anything about the membership, like Commissioner Kelly said, or like Leadership Lawrence or any other what I expect our revenue sources for you, and I didn't see those clearly.
They're
If
not
they
in
are,
there.
They're not in there. Okay.
I would make the statement that it's apples to oranges, looking at the chambers, profit and loss versus other not-for-profits. But if you're looking for the health of the organization, if that's your goal in looking at those numbers, we can provide that.
So, I mean, what we have here is an organization, is a program budget as opposed to the organizational budget, but which is fine so long as we kind of have that context and know it. But because there's salary as part of this budget, I think just knowing that there's a reserve that can cover that salary for, a 6 to 9 month period is important to us. Just, I think that is helpful for us to compare across partners too. And we recognize that the chamber is not like other partners, but just having that reserve so that we have an understanding that we're funding something that also can cover itself if there should be a hiccup.
Sustainability, that's.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the things that I look on every budget request is what percentage of our funding is their overall operational costs, because I'm trying to get a sense of how much are we reliant upon the county for operations. And this doesn't give me that picture. So
So I can tell you our budget is about $1.6 million for all of the organizations. Our positive net revenue at the end of the year is 5 figures. And goes into sustainability. And we have about a 3.4 month reserves for operating budget for across the board. So if you're looking for sustainability and strength of the organization, we can show that, but it is a little bit different with other organizations.
And we're used to that. Almost every organization's a little bit different, but I do think we've struggled to kind of get a good full financial picture. So I think we'll keep
Okay.
working at it.
Okay.
So also for a program budget, does SBDC also have its own program budget? Is that something that we should be seeing in regards to that request? Or is it just simpler that everything goes through EDC and we just kind of wrap it up there?
So the SBDC has their own budget. We have a cooperative funding model. So we are sponsored by the SBA, the Kansas Department of Commerce, and then we receive funding from the city and county. It's about 10% for city and county funding for our budget. We run a very lean budget. We don't have anything left at the end of the year, but the SBDC has been in operation since the 1980s. So we have a consistent churn from the state and federal offices that support us. And it goes to salaries and rent and a little bit of supplies. So very lean, very, our services are service-based. We work with individuals, so it helps to support, to cover our salaries.
Thanks for that, Christina. With the other counties and municipalities for that matter, other parts of the region that your office serves is passed through the local chambers, how you get public dollars primarily? Like, is that common, or is it a little bit unique that it's a pass through here rather than a direct request of us?
Statewide, it's pretty consistent, though it looks a little bit different. I recently transitioned to the regional director role, so this is kind of historically how it's been done. However, we're open to new opportunities. It's really just what works best for the community and what works best for us as well, considering we have a very lean staff. The chamber has been a phenomenal support to allow us to receive funding and support us in the efforts of requesting that.
I will just note, and I guess one clarifying question. So it's 30,000 total that you get, and about 10, but is that direct? I'm a little confused still about the earlier conversation. 10 of that is from us as part of the request, or 30, Bonnie, from us to through you to SBDC?
For the pass through, they received 30,000 from the city and 30,000 from the
Okay,
county. So
30 each.
30,000
Okay,
total. Yes.
Thank you. I just didn't. So
I'm sorry,
60,000
60
total, 30
from me.
from
Right,
each
right,
government.
yes.
Okay. And both passing through. Make sure you use the mic, please, Steve.
Yeah, the 30,000, as was indicated earlier, is an increase from 20,000. Both city and county had been at 20,000. And we made the similar request of the city on the same timeline.
Yep.
And so it was bumped up for 2023 to 30,000.
Got it. Thank you for that little memory refresh. I think sort of similar to comment from Commissioner Willie earlier, there was hardly any information or mention about SBDC in the narrative. Y'all were pretty extensive about the different program areas and focus, but specifically because money is passing through us. I'm familiar with work of SBDC and would love to see it highlighted if that's a particularly important relationship and how the money passes through you all to them. I would like to see in future narratives that spelled out better, because it feels like they were kind of left out, and it left me confused about, what the money was specifically earmarked for, or so a little highlight of that in the future would be helpful for me. And then I just wanted to clarify on the spreadsheet that we do have, which is really all, it's EDC specific. Can you elaborate on what the initiative work is? Like that budget has grown pretty substantially. So I just want to understand what are the initiatives? What's the reason for the big bump in those numbers?
It was because of a very successful capital campaign. So for a 5-year pledge period, beginning in 2023, we received $2.8 million worth of funding pledges from the private community. So in 2022 and prior to that, for 4 years, we transferred 225,000. Catherine, am I doing these numbers right? And then with the capital campaign, it was bumped up to, was it 425,000. So the difference is in the revenue. And then when we did the capital campaign, we broke into 4 separate initiatives. And so we wanted to be true to our investors and show exactly where we were spending the money for each initiative. So it's because of the capital campaign. That's why it was stepped up so much.
We'd be a little cautious of time here. We've said a half an hour here. I'm interested in, so I don't think of our community partners as something that we would provide a COLA increase for. And I saw that came from the city. How did they was that something that you requested? I recognize that we have held and actually lowered the amount that we're giving Chamber and EDC over the years. How did they get to a COLA? Are they thinking of it differently? Is that something you requested?
It was a request that we made.
Okay.
I guess I would say briefly, Commissioner, that implementation of the programs is very reliant on the activities of staff.
Mhm.
And so when we talk about a reduction in support from the city or the county, in this case, the county, obviously, for us to keep doing the same work, and when it just takes We don't keep wages the same and salary and benefits. And also with a successful diversified Douglas County revolving loan fund, if we have to put additional resources for that program, we are very committed to making that program work. And so some funds may be reallocated for that as well. And so COLA was just, a cost of living increase was just a benchmark that we use for example purposes.
Any questions? Any more questions for Chamber EDC? Okay,
I have one for KUIP if we
Yep.
if you allow me the time, because I know we're past that.
oh yeah.
Okay. So I had a question for the KYP partners in terms of the county funding. What does that support and how is that leveraged for additional dollars in the community?
Sure. So it supports our operational funds. We look at our public support as supporting our business services to our companies. And so we have real estate operations, the rents through that support the real estate operations. But without that public support, we wouldn't have the ability to staff the way we do so that we can provide free business services to the companies that we work with, the startup companies, where those business services are really important to their success. And in terms of leveraging the city and the county fund at the same level, we go out currently, you'll see we have a large grant revenue item. And so we've leveraged those funds to go to the EDA to get funding to support our accelerator. And then we go to the state often to leverage those funds as well. And we do the same thing when we do capital support for phase 3. We took the $375,000 commitment from the county, got that from the city, went to the State Department, State Department of Commerce and raised $400,000 and then went to the EDA and raised $8 million and then built a $25 million building. So we always try to do the leverage effect. And so our supplemental 50,000, we would take that and we were trying to expand our accelerator. So right now we have capacity for 6 in our cohorts. We would take that 50. We're going to try to raise 100 in the private sector through some of our companies. And so get another $100,000, double the size of that accelerator, expand our capacity to support startups from 6 in a cohort to 12. So that's an example of what that additional supplemental would go for.
So you've got the operational funds with the supplemental request that goes with that. And then there's also a supplemental request for phase 4 support. Can you talk about that
Sure.
capital request?
We've have 2 phases spec'd out. One's national security related, leveraging the assets we have around that, leveraging the assets the university has around that. We think there's federal support. So it always requires a little bit of match from the partner. And so if we can say we have partner funds in that at the local level, we'll go to the state level and try to get partner funds in that as well. We already have a few dollars from the state and then we'll go to the federal government and try to get some funding to support the next phase. So that'd be phase 4.
And what's the time frame possibly for breaking ground on phase 4?
Hopefully next week. But
Mhm.
in reality, I would love to have something open in 24 to 28 months. It does take a while to build a building like we're talking about. We're talking about a $35 million building, 80,000 square feet. We want to build it big enough to meet the demand that we're seeing. As you think about phase 3 opened last August, we're about 85% committed and probably going to have the last 15% committed, I would say, in the next 60 days. And so that building will be full. We do have some capacity in our original building. It's about 80% full currently, but we need to build to demand. If we don't build to demand, then we're likely to lose opportunities with some of these companies to continue to grow.
Adam, if I could clarify, but how long did it take for phase 3 though?
To build?
Well, but by the time you began the planning, the city and the county made commitments for funding.
We had it was probably 24 months from the time we got EDA funding.
But the county and the city were putting in much earlier than that.
Yeah, and so we asked for that probably 2 years prior to getting the EDA funding. But it was a 5-year commitment to get all the city and the county funds. And so by the time we opened last August, I think last year was the county's 5th year of putting that money in. So the timing of it opening aligned with the timing of us getting our last payment.
So this has been an ongoing budget allocation and that's the request for the next phase is an ongoing. Is there any limitation with your organization if we gave a chunk and just said, that's it?
For this project specific allocation,
Mhm.
there would be no limitation. It would be the same dollar amount if it came in one lump sum versus a 3-year period. We would just hold those funds restricted towards the phase 4 project.
What about for the revolving loan fund? You need me to repeat it?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, if the county decided, you know, if we have a goal of 500,000, say, and this is all hypotheticals, right? And the county says, look, we support that and want to do a third of that, expecting the city and maybe private to do another third, right? If we increased your allocation and just gave it once and then that's it, does that throw a wrench in any of your plans?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Thanks. Any other questions?
Yeah, I am curious, you talk about in a couple of different places that in 2023, KUIP is budgeted to have a public-private revenue ratio of 30 to 70%. I could go figure it out from the budget spreadsheet probably, but can you give me a sense of how that's changed in recent years, at least roughly, how that split between public and private dollars has shifted?
Sure. When the park first started, it was largely weighted towards the public funding. And the goal was always to get more sustainable. We always planned to have public support as a portion of that to support those business services, but it's grown since I've been on in the last 10 years to about 60-40 to 70-30. The good thing we've done is increased our grant funding. And so the more we increase our grant funding and we're successful in that area, the more it pushes that percentage to be more even public-private split. But in terms of growing our revenue dollars, you'll see a significant growth in private dollars over those years, but also a significant growth in the success of our federal grant dollars as well. And so it's stayed about 70-30 the last couple of years. If you got rid of some of that 400,000 we have in federal grant funding now, it would swing probably another 5 or 10% private versus public.
Thanks. And then you also mentioned, you talked about in Q1 of 2023 that 65 companies with 618 jobs and then average of 66,000 per job. You say that that's more than double per capita income for City of Lawrence. Can you just tell me where you got that statistic from?
Yeah, I mean, it's out there. I think it's last time I looked, it was around $33,000 per job in Douglas County. And so if you look at that and just compare it to what the average job wage is, it's about double.
And then, so the amount of companies, the 65, well, what's the total number of companies that you're at?
Currently 67.
67, okay. How many of those have remained in Douglas County, are still operating in Douglas County? Because 67 is representative of like the whole history of companies starting up and using space, whether they moved on kind of quickly or whether they're still there here and growing.
And so it's about 41 park companies in our system now, 26 graduates. We count graduates, companies that stay in the region. We like them to stay in Lawrence and Douglas County, but we did have some companies at Med Center. And so we don't count somebody that moves out of state. There's one exception that just moved over the state line. But 26 of those are park graduate companies who are still in the region or in the state creating jobs, a large percentage of those in Douglas County.
Did you say parked?
Park.
Park. Okay.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to make sure.
I try not to say KUIP because the acronyms
got it.
get
Thank you. It
a
just
little
didn't
confusing.
register fully. Sorry. Okay, thank you. And then
I do think adding that percentage of what stays in Douglas County would be important.
Yeah.
Because, I understand, I mean, we understand that it's a regional resource, but particularly when you're asking for local public tax dollars, it's helpful for us to be able to demonstrate that investment. So of those 26, if 70% are here, well, that's a great investment. You know, if a couple of them
Right.
are in Johnson County, that's okay. But
Okay.
like, I just think that's a percentage that would be really helpful.
And we could break that down and give it to you by Monday if you want to have a
think that'd be
a further
helpful.
breakdown. Okay.
Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Thanks for further articulating. I would appreciate seeing that and understanding that impact is. As part of that, let me just clarify, any business that is functioning in any of the buildings or space at KUIP, it is, they're paying income taxes on payroll taxes, but there are no property taxes being paid by those businesses or by,
That's generally true, except
KYP.
for the West Building. We pay property taxes on that building, even though it's owned by the city and the county. Right.
okay.
I would find it interesting if we pay our tax.
Thank you for saying that, Sarah. Okay, but so aside from that, which is not really, it's not contributing to our tax base, our property tax base, any of those businesses currently because of tax incentives that are available and being taken advantage of for positive growth. But I just want to be clear that there's not any contributions to our property tax base currently.
Correct. We currently don't pay property tax on our West Campus locations.
Okay. And do you have any of the businesses, maybe when you're figuring out the percentages and some specific data about companies that have stayed in Douglas County or still currently here, if any of those have moved out of KUIP space and into their own commercial or industrial space elsewhere in the community, and there's contribution to the tax base, I'd be interested to know that too, if there are any
Okay, we can break
examples.
that down. Any company that owns their own building, certainly we could pull that information. People who are renting space, it's a little more difficult to make that assessment.
Sure, yeah, and rentals are a different story, but yeah, if any of them have bought their own space. And then can you just quickly describe the difference between the indirect and induced jobs in that little chart? I just want to make sure
Sure.
I'm clear on what you meant.
Yeah, and
by
we
it.
generally talk about our direct jobs that we can see and count, information that we can get. But there's economic development software out there that'll talk about for every job created under this NICS code or this kind of job, it has an indirect effect. So think about service industry jobs, doctors and things like that is indirect jobs, and induced are supply chain jobs. So they need to buy supplies from this company. And so it's just a multiplier effect of having these kind of jobs, which generally have a higher indirect and induced effect than other jobs in the community.
Thank you. Okay, I'm done with questions now.
I just have two really quickly, Adam. Thanks for being here. A big part of the ask from KUIP to go back to the old funding is that it helps leverage other grants. Do you have specific instances where you have not received money because the funding is not equalized?
Yeah, I mean, I would just say the size of the accelerator that we've been able to create, if we're able to get 50,000 more, we're going to be able to double that capacity. And so we're going to go try to raise dollars to support it. We take all of our public funding and say, how do we leverage that? Our current dollars are leveraged into our grant funding that we get at the federal government. We have to have a commitment to that. And so we say we're going to have city and county funding to match the federal dollars that we get for those grants.
So is there a reason you put it's at 200,000, what you're asking for is that 200? Is there a reason that it's there? Is that like a marker federally? I'm just trying to understand the logic. I truly understand that it's important that it be a partnership between city, county, and the university. That makes sense to me. That everyone would pay equally I'm just trying to understand like how that is an important indicator when trying to leverage those other grants.
We just like to show that it's a partnership among our local public partners. But we take all the public dollars we get and try to go out and leverage those one or two times if we can. And so it's not specific to the $200,000 necessarily, but every time we get those dollars, the impact is just leveraged and increased. And so if we could get back that 50, we think we can go out and get another $100,000 on top of that. So it'd be important for expanding our capacity to support startup companies.
Okay. And then it says that you've used 30% of the incentive pool. I think the incentive pool is a really great thing. You're asking for us to increase the amount in the incentive pool again, correct? Not increase it, but
Yes, just refund it
refund
on
it.
an annual basis. Yeah.
Mhm. And if you've only distributed 30%, why do you think that, what's your logic behind we need the same amount? I mean, I know it's halfway through the year and maybe you'll do 70% for the rest of the year, but just what was the thinking there?
Just to have an evergreen type funding that we can always leverage. We don't try to just give it out. We try to leverage it for opportunities to get companies in, to help companies grow. I think we've used about $17,853, not about, we have this year. And so we've hit our mark for 25% into minority and women already this year. And so we're just waiting for opportunities that we can leverage that fund. Maybe that's a tipping point for somebody to be able to come in and take space if in our recruitment efforts, or a startup company that needs important funds. And so it's just opportunity based.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. We appreciate you answering our questions. We will move on to heritage and land management.
Commissioners, I know we're a little behind on time, so I want to get us quickly to hearing directly from our heritage partners today. You have representatives of all of our heritage partners with us today, as well as the Douglas County Extension and the Fair Board. And I want to make sure that we also highlight, we have our new Heritage Program Manager with us as well, Caitlin Amerlin, who's been working hard to get integrated with all the partners and forge some relationships that are really leading to, have integrated nicely with some coordinated efforts to amongst the different heritage partners to work together and collaborate, maximize efforts on kind of some core functions and programs, volunteer efforts, things of that nature that I think you'll hear about today. But there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of ideas to try to utilize the county's dollars to the greatest extent possible, use them truly as the leverage that we intend them to be, to have the greatest amount of impact. So, I don't know if there's anything, Caitlin, that you want to share that you think is important to highlight, but if not, we can move directly into any questions that commissioners have. You good, Art?
Thank you, Jill. Okay, we have a lot of organizations here. We probably won't have questions for all of you. But if it's okay with commissioners, I'd like to hear a little more. We have a number of supplemental requests, and Steve, maybe you're the one to talk about them. I will tell you that I got a giggle out of when Sarah was walking us through the budget and the supplemental request. She said, well, you got what you asked for. So thank you for all of you working together. The one that I'm really interested in is this request for public requests, of staffing a public request of what's in your collections. Is that not just tell me about when you get a public request for materials, is there a fee involved to pay, is there an application? I'm just interested in that.
At the moment right now, we do not charge a fee for those services, but being able to complete the request is dependent on the time that staff may have to be able to fulfill it. And this is a circumstance that exists across all of our organizations. I'm familiar with how many requests we get. I know everyone gets them. I'm just not sure how frequently that is. But what we had hoped we could do is start to charge a fee for those services, especially for ones that aren't just, pulling a document or getting a few things out for someone to look at, but where people are coming to us and asking for us to do their research to solve their problem or find their answer. And, that's common for historical societies and organizations to do. So we would look at putting a fee structure with that. And then hopefully leverage the work study partnership we have with KU to find a work study student to do that. And then between the income and the work study offset, be able to use that to pay the wages of that part-time position. And that position would be able to address questions no matter which institution they came to, and would be able to get familiar with the resources, research resources that are held by all of the organizations. And we posted that job because, if we can fund it through fees and work study, we could start using that this year because we're already getting those requests. And we do have, I think, 4 students who expressed an interest in starting in the fall.
Thank you. That's helpful.
So are there models for how that fee structure would work that other communities do? Because I know that's one of the great things about history museums is the amount of kind of personal time you can get out of that. I recognize that that has to have its limits, but what are some of the models for it?
It's the model is pretty consistent, and it's an hourly fee, generally somewhere around $20-25, at least the last time I checked. But we can look at other institutions and, find out kind of what the average is.
I appreciate knowing that. I was wondering the same thing. And I think that the labor is valuable. And so charging fees for that, for labor is valid. So first question, well, comment and then a question is, I also am really excited that y'all have really taken to heart the spirit of collaboration and how much more collective power your organizations have in coordinating together and figuring out how to make the most of available resources and to have continuity across all the different historical assets in our community. I want to understand, I guess, sort of from a governance or structure point of view, like we have multiple requests for some specific things. Would all of that money live with Watkins or Freedom's Frontier and be dispersed or allocated? Sort of help me understand what financially you have discussed in terms of sort of sharing and dispersing those resources across the organizations.
The discussion that we've had so far has been either potentially having those resources live with the Watkins, and Watkins would cover those expenses, sort of like we're doing with the way the ARPA money is being released. Either an organization sends us a request for funds and we send them a check, or they just send the bills to us and we pay those bills. So we thought that it could work that way. We also talked about this as being resources that would that could reside with Caitlin, and we could make requests to draw on that as bills came due.
That's the first I've heard of Caitlin doing that. So I appreciate what the Watkins has done with ARPA money. That's awesome. That was pretty clear that each organization got these dollars, right? And so while I know you all get along just fantastically, I don't want to put words in Commissioner Reed's mouth. I'm thinking of the time when it doesn't go fantastically and sort of what's the governance structure, who decides who gets that as much. I'd want to check. I think we just need to have more conversations. This is great, huge progress in my opinion, and very supportive of it. But I also want to make sure that we have the structure there so that there's not disagreements down the road of, and I'm never saying this would happen, so Watkins got all the money and they got all the help and nobody else could access it, right? So just how we
I
organize
completely
that.
understand that.
Yeah.
And I think what we would want to do is put in place some kind of written agreement that we've all agreed to, and then some sort of system of checks that would probably connect with the boards of each of these organizations so that they would know they're getting the benefit that they were promised.
I think Commissioner Tu and Jill and Caitlin, I'm looking at you. I think that's something we could work into the community partner agreement, similar to our service agreements. Also with some maybe reporting metrics of like after a year is over, like what was your report? Who did get help? Where were the hours located? Some of those types of things.
Yeah, and I think that's where the idea of, giving Caitlin can have oversight in different ways of this and managing it to make sure it's meeting the expectations it's intended to meet. And that doesn't necessarily mean that she has to be, she's paying the bills, she's the keeper of those funds. It was just an idea, but I think there's a lot of trust within the Watkins and the infrastructure that they've built through the ARPA program. But yeah.
But Caitlin could serve as the oversight or the place where our reporting would go. So there would be a kind of a third party looking out for it. We're starting to get a little bit of experience with this summer. The Watkins got a grant from the Douglas County Community Foundation to fund our summer program. And our educator, who's familiar with the collections at all of the sites, created a family activity for each of the museums, and we've distributed those materials. So now, because of that grant, we have to be able to report how is that impacting all of the organizations. So we're starting to learn how to do that, right now, even as we speak.
So we have 4 different supplemental requests for the kind of the group of you together, and each of them is for a part-time position. Are there some that kind of rise to the top as like, these are the top needs of those 4? Or how would you evaluate that? And this may be a question that other partners within that group might want to weigh in on too?
I think they may need to, I think we should hear from everyone about what their needs are. We identified two things that were really important, kind of foundational. One of them is addressing the needs for gaining control over our collections. Hence the additional pay to have someone who can address collections needs across the county. The other one is our need for labor. And we're tapping out our known volunteer base. We need to create a new one. And we don't have the time to do that right now because we're busy running our organizations. We had hoped that would be a way to build up a body of people who could help at sites across the county. We've actually approached the Cultural Center at Haskell to find out if, they might also be able to draw on those volunteers, because I think people would be interested in that. But which one is more important? They're equally important to me. They may not be to everyone else. And I think this is a case where, if we had to choose, we would look at it as a group and decide what was going to be the most helpful.
Just to flush that out a little bit more, well, and first, thank you, Commissioner Kelly. You articulated my thoughts quite well, so I appreciate you fleshing that out. And do just want to make sure that as you move forward collaboratively, that there's some real intention and thought behind what the structure and the checks and balances of that looks like. So I'll look forward to hearing more about that. So it's 4 requests total that you broke down. I think maybe what I'm hearing from you, and I'm interested, anybody else who wants to share input, please don't be shy and turn on that mic and tell us who you are, tell the public and share your thoughts. But I think if I'm hearing you right, Steve, your thought is that if we weren't to grant if we decided to give a smaller amount than the total 104,000, that you would decide collectively how to prioritize that rather than ranking today or this week. The 4 requests that you put, there's not a clear ranking. As I'm seeing head nods from Steve. Anybody else want to jump in and provide opinions or input about whether or not ranking those very explicit requests versus if you were to get a smaller allocation, sort of going back to the drawing board about where you would allocate those dollars? Is that making sense, commissioners? Does that make sense to you, Sarah?
Well, I'm a little nervous about, so I think it's important for us to understand what it is that we're allocating funds for. So if the commissioners decide to allocate a smaller amount, I think we need to give them some specifics as to how we would like it to be used. I think there can be some modification in that space, but I'm going to need a contract. So eventually we're going to need to really clarify what that money's going for. So,
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. That it's a valid point. So I guess, with other community partners that we received multiple requests from, they are prioritized in terms of their top priority and lesser priorities if we were to only fund part of their supplemental requests. So have you all had discussion about what is, of the 4 things you specifically laid out, what's top important?
We could rank those and I could get that information to you right away. We could probably do it after this
On
meeting.
Monday?
Yeah.
Okay, that'd be helpful for me just because with everybody who submits multiple requests, that is an element that I'm looking at. If we next week are talking about where to really prioritize some investments, it's important to me to know from you all what is top 2 priorities and not just broadly in categories, but of those 4.
I'll just, and I know we have others to move on to. I do want to just double down on something Sarah said about collecting data and metrics. One of the things that I was really excited about was when you had some really nice metrics in there about your engagement levels across different sectors and how you look at engagement across different sectors. And that was helpful to me because I hadn't thought about some of those ways. But that would be something I would really hope from if we decide to fund one of these is we would have that because I struggle each year with the different levels of funding at each historic site. It is very hard as a commissioner to understand why we fund one at this level and one at this level, and this one gets some, their local funding and this one doesn't. So Eudora gets some local funding, but others don't. And I'm hoping since we issued a challenge and you met it, here's the next one, right? Is can we figure out a way to tie some of that funding to actual metrics that you're having? Otherwise, to me, it's more of a grant, right? It's something special that you're trying to do, similar to what we saw with ARPA, but how we're relating, the engagement levels. I really like the requests here, and we're going to talk about, I'm getting a little ahead of myself here, about how to engage more people because it will get your other dollars up, hopefully. I mean, the more people that come through your doors and see your amazing sites, the more likely they are to generate funds. And so I'm just trying to find a way to help us make good allocations that are data-driven decisions. And a lot of this is historic, no pun intended, and just how to make those allocations in a fair and equitable way that makes sense for you all. So I just share that thought.
I have just a couple of questions. So several of these sites have staff. Is payroll all run through the Watkins? Do I understand that right? Does each organization run its own payroll? Okay.
Well, sort of. We work with Clinton Lake Historical Society to run their staffing of the museum when it's open during the summer through our HR effort. And that's another place where we're leveraging the KU work study partnership to find a work study position to fill that. But other than that, I think the only other paid staff person is Ben, who is paid by the city of Eudora, and all of the rest of the labor at all of the organizations is volunteer. Except for Freedom's Frontier.
Yeah, I have a salary line in Lecompton.
Yeah.
Mhm.
We have a part-time
That's
person.
right. Yeah.
And Paul, is the salary that is, the payroll is run through Lecompton Historical Society?
It's run through the Lecompton Historical Society, yes.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to know kind of what other intersections there already are in terms of, are we building on those or are these newer? So that was my one question. And the other is with the pretty recent opening of the Haskell Cultural Center, is that a group that could be reached out to before, I mean, in terms of whether they can also benefit from some of these like collection management, have some of that also benefit there?
Mhm.
Is that a conversation that could be had before Monday, or is that a quick turnaround?
I can give it a shot before Monday.
All
I know Travis and he's around, so I'll see what I can find out.
Okay, I would just love to see if
Sure.
we're putting out funds for a variety of organizations that we capture as many as possible that have the opportunity to benefit from that.
So I know we also have the Fair Board here, and Extension Council and Conservation District. Are we ready to move on from historical societies and to some of these others? Okay. Maybe Extension Council next. I had some questions for them. Marlon, thanks for being here and for your narrative. I was trying to add this up and I hope I got it right. So in looking at the number of employees that are funded by Douglas County, I think I got 3.25. Does that sound right?
Exclusively by the Extension Council? Is that the number of employees you're looking for? Those?
Sure. Let's go with that. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So yes, that is correct. So of the 9 positions that we have that you see in the salary line, 3.25 of those in 2022 were exclusively employed by the Extension Council.
Okay, and when
Five of them were jointly employed by the Extension Council and the university.
okay. And so how many people, my understanding is we don't pay benefits for all of your staff. Is that correct?
That is correct.
How many do we pay for?
So there are 4.
Okay,
So 3 of the 3.25. And actually, there's one more. So the 4th one, we actually pay through a grant. So the county doesn't pick up the employer share of that. The grant picks up the employer share of that. But we have 4 people in our office that are on your health plan.
okay. And so the request, the supplemental request is for increasing the pay for those 4 or for all extension employees?
So that's for all of the existing employees that aren't grant funded. So that's the 8.25 people.
Okay.
And there's a supplemental request in there for an additional person.
Yeah. Okay.
You said the request for the is for 8 of your staff members? That's what, okay,
8.25.
just 8.25. Thank you for repeating that. And then an additional new position.
Yep, and plus provision for health insurance for that position. Because that would be an Extension Council employee. And we would want them to have the same benefits as other Extension Council employees.
And is that those benefits are health insurance and also retirement or just health insurance?
Right, so the provision that's separated out on the board is just for the health insurance piece. So currently the health insurance premiums for the Extension Council employees are a separate line item. But in the conversations with Sarah and Cami earlier this year, we decided we needed at least to reflect that number. And so that you would have a truer estimation of what that cost would be. Now, how you, if you were to fund it, decided to do that would be entirely up to you. Do you want to take that piece that's there for the health benefit and fold that into the health benefit line for Extension Council? That would be an option.
So I'm looking at your budget requests. It's page 7 at your budget details. And I see 225,000 in non-appropriated funds. Where do those come from?
Okay, I'm sorry. I was looking, it's actually my page 8, so it took me a second. Can you
Okay.
repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so if I look here at the budget details, I see 225,000 in non-appropriated funds.
Right.
And then down in the expenses, we have 200,000 in expenses of are those fees for programs? Is that what it is?
Yeah, and those grants that we bring in to fund those other positions. Our goal is to capture in excess of what we need to expend. So we look for opportunities to generate revenue, including finding facilities and administrative overhead opportunities with grants so that we can contribute $25,000. So if you just look at that chart, what you see there, 225 in, 200 out on the non-appropriated line, that's accounting for a $25,000 contribution through our programmatic activities to that annual budget.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I think that's something that we have asked in the past about is
That's
how
right.
we can pull some of the funds from that. So thank you for that.
And Marlon, that's a fairly recent change of being able to capture some overhead for some of the work that Extension does. Is that right?
That's correct. We've been doing that for the last 4 years, generating in excess of what we needed to cover those non-appropriated expenses. And then contributing that back to the unrestricted balance.
Marlon, I think we discussed this a bit during our work session recently, so forgive me if being a bit repetitive, but I didn't have clear notes from that day. So you talk about the 67 local units of extensions throughout the state. Douglas County ranking 5th in population, 17th in level of appropriation. Can you just explain the level of appropriation piece and how that works? What, I mean, has it always been 17th in appropriation? Does that change? Has it, if it has changed, better or worse?
Yeah, I haven't tracked that over time. I think, so the reason that there are 67 local units is because many of the counties have formed districts. So there's an amendment to the Extension Council law in the 1990s that permitted multiple county extension councils to come together and become an extension district. And they actually have taxing authority. So they are their own sort of taxing authority. And so they have, I guess, greater revenues in those than they have had historically. And so historically, we probably were higher ranked on the level of appropriation, but that's that level of appropriation is just the county mill revenue from those districts or the county appropriation for county extension councils.
Got it. So that appropriation is determined by what the collection of local and university funding
Oh, it's
for
just
each,
the,
just the local,
from the county
mill
tax base. Right?
levied mill.
Yeah,
Okay,
but it does
got it.
not take into consideration anything that's not that,
I
right?
got you.
And so
Okay.
it's like, it wouldn't take into consideration like the monetary value, for instance, of the building that the extension office is in, or that health insurance piece, because that's a separated line item. And so there's a lot. So there on the next page, I try to enumerate like what those other contributions are, the page after the table, the budget table,
Okay, thank
my
you.
page 9.
So Marlon, this is all within one request, but there's a couple of pieces. So kind of similarly that we asked some of our other partners, could you rank, like there's a new position, the office manager receptionist position, and then there's the equity market adjustment. If you had to prioritize between those two, is that something you'd thought about?
That's not a conversation that our council has had. But I'm like other commitments that have been made today, I'd be more than happy to pull our budget committee together to have that conversation. I think this is a different sort of way of presenting the data than when, Sarah and Cammie saw it earlier. Because their recommendation was like, well, it'd be good if you at least broke it out a little bit more so that the commissioners could see it. And so, I think our ultimate goal is to increase our capacity and reduce the risk of having employees leave for better paying jobs. So those, I'll steal Steve's note that those are equally important to me. But we can we can take it back to the budget committee if you want to see a ranked priority of those lists.
Yeah, I'd be curious to see that.
Okay.
Any other questions for extension? Okay, we have Fair Conservation District, Finland Fair.
It's like
Heritage Conservation Council.
Finland Fair didn't have any additions to previous, so that one's fairly easy. I'll ask the Douglas County Fair Board in terms of the supplemental request, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Good morning. I'm Cheryl Hunsinger. I am the treasurer for the Douglas County Fair Board. We're asking for an additional $5,000 for 2024. The reason we're asking this is the Douglas County, we're asking for that because of the security and safety measures and more entertainment. The Douglas County Fair is growing every year. And within that, we have found that we need to add vehicle parking and we need to do it safely for the pedestrians. So we are hiring people to come in and do the parking and give us security every year. That is going to be $3,000 to $5,000 additionally from what we already have. So that's why we're asking for that. the biggest thing that we get back from the community is that they want the free entertainment. We have a bigger petting zoo this year, a family dance teaching, more bands. And we can't sustain that with the budget that we have. We need that additional funding. Our biggest thing is security and protecting the lives of the people that are at the fairgrounds. And we have people driving in and out. So we need somebody to help us park those cars so that we keep everybody safe, especially our little guys that are out there showing animals and stuff and can't be seen by people. So that's our biggest thing. And we really do want to keep this a free fair. We don't want to have to charge. So we are asking for that help from you guys.
And the parking and security, is that something you've been covering to some level up until now? And now this is like a
Yes.
different level?
Yeah, because we know now, because we've done it in the past, we realize that we have to have this to sustain the safety that we have at the fairgrounds. So that's really important to us.
I almost hate to ask this. Have you had any accidents up until now?
No.
Okay.
We've
Good.
had some close calls.
Yeah.
I mean, little ones dart. So I've even had to slam on the brakes a few times because the kids will run. Y'all know that. And they don't look.
I think we have had accidents.
You,
Yeah, the county pays the liability insurance. I could tell you we've had accidents.
okay. So there's your answer. Yeah, we've had.
First of all, I want to say thank you for including a joke in your
Yeah.
supplemental.
Did you like that?
I don't know that not everyone gets to read our books, but it's always nice to have a
Yeah,
joke thrown in
you,
there.
EWE,
Yeah.
do the math.
It was truly a dad joke, but it was all right. As a dad, I'll take it. Did your board have any discussion about using some of your fund balance for this cost, or how are you holding that fund balance and what's that for?
Yeah, come up here.
She can use that. You can come in it. Right here.
Hey, Candace,
Hey.
thanks for being here.
Yeah.
So currently you have a fund balance of $59,242, right? And the request is for 5,000. Was there any discussion among your board about using some of the fund balance for this request?
We have, and we will this year. But over time, we are using the minimum security with that extra fund. So over the years, adding actually all the security we need will increase. And then that extra fund will obviously go down if we don't have the supplement 5,000.
And I'm sure you talked about, I know you want to keep, but you do have some fees that are required as part of the fair. And I'm sure you talked about maybe slightly increasing those fees, but they must be at a point where you can't increase them any higher.
We have to charge for the kids for their animals. And so we don't want to get that completely out of whack so that the kids won't bring their animals to the fair. We're trying everything we can to increase our revenue so that we don't always have to ask for more money. But at this point, we really do need the 5,000.
Okay, thanks. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
My follow-up question is not just for the fair board. I just kind of want to, I guess, pull the thread a little bit of all the conversations we're having so far this morning. Specific to the fair, I'm curious if do y'all have any, I mean, you have some sponsors, right? I mean, you have a fundraising line, so certainly you do some private fundraising and that fluctuates
do.
over time. You have specific sponsors for the fair or
Yes.
events at the fair?
Yes.
Has that grown over time? The reason I'm asking that, Cheryl, is just because I'm thinking about tourism and how, I mean, everybody sitting around this table contributes to tourism economy and including the fair, even though it's a special event, it's a big draw. It's not just for Douglas County families, right? Like
Right,
folks come
Right. We
around
get,
the region.
yeah, we get people from out of town coming in too. This year, we are doing something a little different. we have our derby and that's one of our biggest fundraisers. So we have decided to do a 2-day derby. So we're going to do one on Friday night and we're going to do one on Saturday night. And the Saturday night one, we have to hold just a little longer because of the auction. And we don't want the noise to oversee the auction so that the kids don't get their premiums they want off their animals. So we don't know how this second derby is going to work at all. So we're going into this hoping that we can come out okay, but we just don't know. Because, you know, if it rains, then we've got a mud pit and we don't know what's going to happen.
Sure. Yeah, and the weather factor is can really throw you all off some
Yes.
years, I know.
And we are looking for alternatives to bring in money. Candace and I were talking before we came in like, about a couple of ideas that we're going to take to the board and see if we can come up with something to add.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And the reason I bring it up is it's an important request, I think, and quite a small request in the grand scheme of the budget requests we receive. But I also just don't undersell yourselves in how much you contribute to the community and what a draw that is, and that it draws tourists for a week a year, in addition to all the other layers of community participation in the fair. And I think that's great and exciting. And I wonder if there are sponsorship dollars or other connections to be made with our local chamber, for example, who's not here anymore, but any of the local chambers for that matter. And those or Explore Lawrence, for example, who's really focused on tourism. I just wonder if there's some other opportunities there for you to draw down some dollars from other parts of the community that really recognize that the fair is a significant tourism draw and a special event every year that deserves some additional sponsorship.
That is something that we can look into. I know this year we're going to talk to the people at the fair that are coming for the auction and stuff prior to the auction starting, and recognizing our partners that do contribute to our funds. And we're hoping to increase that this year.
And I think, everybody around this table are also partners to you, and it might not seem like a completely obvious thing, but as we think about heritage and cultural sites and historical sites as very place-based, but we're expanding that conversation and really talking about what different heritage and culture looks like, and that is event-based too. And the fair is a prime example of that. So I just want you to also recognize that these are all your partners, and that there's maybe some more opportunities for creative ideas on how to both bring in more revenue for the fair board and really help sustain yourselves moving forward, and generate more attendance and excitement around your events too. So
Yep. Well, we're looking at every avenue we can look at.
I would also put in the similar plug for the Vinland Fair is just a cultural touch point that has been going on for 110 years or more. So
Yeah,
also.
that one's
a
been
great
around a
draw.
long time.
Uh-huh.
Any other questions for our partners here?
I'll ask just a quick one for the Conservation District. Susie, thanks for being here. So I know the state owes a matching amount of 25,000 for running the conservation districts. And it looks like maybe they're finally getting there. Usually it's hovered below that. So, and I see that's in your adopted budget for 2023. Are we likely to see the full 25,000 from the state? If so, it would be a first time.
No.
Okay.
They always say they're going to give us 25,000, so that's what I put in there, but they have never given us the full 25,000 yet.
All right. They've been creeping towards it. Looks like 2022 was 24,707. You think maybe they could just make that whole?
I'm hoping, but I have not heard yet. So,
So-
but it is doubtful because they've never reached that point.
So other than the few dollars increase that we might see from the state this year, Conservation District hasn't had any increases of any revenue sources for a long time. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. But in terms of like state dollars for cost share dollars, the state and federal, we leverage quite a bit back into the community through Conservation District.
Yes, we do.
And I think
We
maybe you have-
leverage quite a bit into the community through the state cost share and also through our education and outreach programs. That also helps with generate dollars as well. So.
And you've had some turnover in some of the positions including the education person in that position. Has salary been part of that in terms of not being able to keep up with competitive wages, or has that been less of an issue?
That was one of the issues. Right now, we do not have an education outreach coordinator. I am doing that at the moment. So right now, we do just have 2 employees. So
We are working on
yes.
having an application. We are in the works of creating like a job description and working towards eventually being able to advertise that position for an educational outreach coordinator, hopefully sometime within this next year.
So the 2024 budget will reflect the director position, the education position, and then is this the NRCS Tech is the other person? Does that run through the Conservation District?
Yes, it does. Now we do receive some additional funds from the NRCS for that position. And we facilitate that as that's part of their salary, but then we also supplement that salary.
Okay, so what you get for that position does not, for outside funding, doesn't cover the full position there?
No.
Okay. Those are my questions. Thank you.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions for our partners here. We want to thank you for coming. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Would that be okay, Sarah? And then we'll start back here at, well, we're a few minutes late. We apologize for those who are online. We are having some intergovernmental discussions with Lecompton's mayor. So now we move on to our administrative and core functions, and we have administration, which does have some supplemental requests, IT, which also has a supplemental request, sustainability and maintenance. I don't think there are supplemental requests behind those, but I'm doing this off the top of my head. Sarah, are you doing the
I get to do this one.
overview? Awesome.
Thank you, commissioners. So it's my pleasure to introduce our core service governmental partners. I'm going to start with administration and kind of give you the highlights and then work through them. Inside the 2024 budget for administration, we added an additional assistant county administrator position as reflected as prioritized by the county commission in advance of the commission moving to 5 commissioners. In addition to that, I wanted to point out that on our professional services line, in addition to several employee programs, this line includes funding for the Kansas Statewide Homeless Coalition Regional Coordinator position that previously was a contract. Now it's a different contract, but it's a contract that supports the statewide homeless coalition regional coordinator position. And there's also $98,000 for supportive housing program, Housing First. I'm going to talk a little bit about housing and human services, even though I think they're going to be here tomorrow for additional, but just to give you a little bit of a preview. In the cover sheets, we outlined the additional sources of funds that are distributed by the Housing and Human Services Program to the community for rent and utility assistance. Currently the Affordable Housing Trust Fund from the City of Lawrence provides $350,000. They also have a grant from the United Way of Caw Valley for $15,000. There's an ESG grant for $50,000 and $75,000 for community development block grant dollars from the City of Lawrence. Kim is here for sustainability, which is also part of administration. Currently, the sustainability area has a county staff of 4.25 FTE. The Common Ground Program Manager is supported by a federal grant that's going to expire in 2025. So I just want to point that out. That's kind of an upcoming issue that we're going to have conversations about. We have initiated those conversations with the City of Lawrence. But that grant will expire. The contractual budget includes funding to complete the open space plan development, as well as adoption and initial implementation of the climate action plan. I'm going to move to IT. There were several reconfigurations and reclassifications to personnel inside the IT budget this year. There is a supplemental request for a security engineer position, and I'll let Starla talk about that a little bit later. There were some increases. Oops. There are some increases to contractual line items and transfers to equipment reserve to accommodate inflationary cost increases surrounding software maintenance. Jimmy Wilkins is here for our maintenance and grounds division. There also were some reclassifications and some promotions in his department. There was a new line added for department-specific safety training and also some increases for inflation. Also want to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about the Employee Benefits Fund, because you have your major architects for the Employee Benefits Fund here with Brooke Sauer and Michelle Spreer. Line 58-100 employee health and dental insurance shares were calculated using existing enrollment. I'm really loud, Eric, so if you could move, okay. That's because I'm loud. Okay, so I'm going to try to stand back. Employee health and dental insurance shares were calculated using existing enrollment data as of June 1st of 2023. We used a premium escalation of 4% was factored in for the plan year that will begin June 1st of 2024. So, you know, as we're working on the 24 budget, we only know so many months of what that plan year is going to be. And then we have to use an escalator that we don't know what that will be. And we used to use 6. We've lowered that to 4 moving forward. The KPNF employer contribution decreased by 2.03% from 25.13% in 2023. The certified rate for 2024 is 23.1. The amount budgeted also includes additional payout contributions for overtime and based on employees who are eligible for retirement. And then the CAPERS employer contribution increased by 0.83 from 9.43 in 2023. The certified rate for 2024 is 10.46. The amount budgeted also includes additional payout contributions for overtime based on employees who are eligible for retirement. We anticipate starting 2024 with a 24.8% fund balance in that fund and ending the year with a 29.6% fund balance, which is why I think we can have some conversations about, you know, this year as a part of our plan year, we instituted a premium holiday, which is where both the employee does not pay their contributions for a month and the employer does not pay their contributions for a month. That's a great way to sort of spend down fund balance without making an ongoing adjustment to what rates are that might fluctuate over time, given that fund balance and the health of the health and funding, health insurance, other reserves. I think we could look at a second premium holiday if the plan stays on track at either at the middle or the end of this current plan year that we're in, which would impact this budget here for 2024. And just, you should know that this team also, and Cammie and myself, also manage the budgets for countywide, commissioners, utilities, and coroner. So if you have questions on those particular budgets, we can answer them now if that's convenient for the commission. So with this, I think we can, I kind of want Starla to talk a little bit about the security engineer position. So turn it over to her.
Hello. So security is the first and most important IT objective for Douglas County IT. We also have a cybersecurity insurance policy that is a high responsibility for us to maintain multiple security protocols, one of them being multi-factor authentication, which is a requirement both from an administrative perspective as well as for our individuals who are remotely connecting to our solutions. Ransom attacks are also on the rise with the recent Wyandotte County attack. Our concern is how to protect Douglas County. In March of 2023, it was the most prolific month recorded by cybersecurity analysts in recent years, measuring 459 attacks and an increase of 91% from the previous month and 62% compared to March of 2022. We use a KnowBe4 solution for phishing testing, which you guys have all passed every quarter, so thank you. But recent testing, we had 4.5% phishing prone, which means 15 individuals here in the county clicked on an email that then could cause a ransom attack. We also, thanks to you guys, we've purchased a solution called Ransom Care. It's a solution that we monitor our network and make sure that if a ransom attack is happening, it prevents it from spreading and shuts down that user account. So those are a few of the items that we are doing, but we do not have an individual to monitor all of these solutions that we currently have. And so we have 3 individuals out of our 11 staff that are splitting time doing security analysis. And so it is a need for us to have that full-time individual to help protect the county from any type of security concerns.
So who all is covered under that? So administration, commissioners, does district court also, are they
Yes.
also covered by you?
The only individuals that are currently not underneath our IT solutions is the sheriff's office, but we are currently, they are behind some of the security requirements that are a part of our policy, and they are under our cybersecurity insurance policy. And so we are helping them currently. We recently moved to O365, which helped with the multi-factor authentication, and we're helping them move that direction as well. They currently are not using multi-factor for some of their administrative logins, and we are also assisting them with those those requirements from our insurance policy. So overall, everyone is underneath our team.
So it sounds to me like you're working with the sheriff's office to make sure that they're sort of in compliance with the our insurance requirements, which they're covered under. Has the conversation gone further than that about whether or not their solutions and IT work would come under the county-wide? I'm just curious if those conversations have been started and or if there is a particular reason or uniqueness to why the sheriff has separate IT from the rest of the county departments.
So I think it's just to kind of put a little nuance on the conversation. The sheriff's office and both district court have IT specific staff that work on specific programs for their areas. That's pretty common. You know, if you're with an operation of that size with pretty sophisticated software programs, at least in my experience, it's pretty normal that a larger department might have their own staff maintaining software and troubleshooting particular applications. The district court is on our network. The sheriff is currently not on our network. I've been here 13 years now, so I think I can qualify as been a long time. So it's been that way for the entire tenure that I have been here. I think it was done much longer before. And I think it was probably done at really the birth of some of the IT work here at the county, just because of all of the intensive security protocols around their particular networks and servers. So, I mean, I think it's, you know, I hate to sort of say it's always been done that way, but it really has always been done that way. I am impressed and the sheriff is having ongoing conversations with Starla and her team about how we can integrate for more streamlined efficiency in terms of the network and the security concerns that Starla's team can help the sheriff with. I would envision that he would always have staff that would work specifically to maintain jail security systems, Spillman, radios and computers, laptops and cars, mobile data, emergency communications center, specific platforms. Starla's team does not have that expertise. So we would always have that staff working directly with the sheriff's team and the ECC team to manage their IT. But the network, the security, website, domain, boy, I just said a whole bunch of terms. I don't even know what they are, but
You're doing great.
so see, look, I'm getting there. I'm practically a coder. So, I think is how that split will work. And Starla, do you have any more you want to add to that?
That was fine. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that nuance there. And I think, I mean, and there is a difference between the network administration and really the security piece is obviously being sort of the of primary importance. It makes sense to me that the larger departments in our community would have IT staff. I've always made an assumption, but haven't really checked that assumption, that the sheriff's office, district, primarily because of the jail, district court, and then also emergency communications might all have either separate or specific staff members related to IT, because but it sounds like emergency communications is completely under the umbrella of our network administration.
They're
and
supported by
don't-
the sheriff.
Okay, they're connected to the sheriff. Okay, thanks. That helps.
Well, both commissioners have gone down the road that I was going to go, so I'll just finish it off and say we have two requests. We have a request from the sheriff and a request from IT that are supplemental and not included in the current recommended budget. It is there. It's a network, right? And so how would, if we didn't fund one or didn't fund the other, does it have implications on your request? Does that make sense? So for example, if we funded security at the county, but not at the sheriff, or the other way around, does that not create the staffing that you need to address it at the sheriff's office? Or do you still have the staffing to make that?
I'm a little confused. The only,
Super confusing, yes.
okay. From a county perspective.
Right.
Our cyber security insurance is the umbrella that I am most concerned with. And the sheriff's office is under that umbrella of our cyber insurance. I feel that it is important for the county to have this security engineer, and I feel that it would be a part of their responsibility to meet with the sheriff's office on a regular basis to help and make sure that we are all compliant as a whole.
Yeah, and specifically the sheriff's office, and I don't mean to speak for the sheriff since he's not here, is a network support position. So it's not specifically tied to security. So I'd say that they're going to kind of do slightly different things. But I do hope that that I think there's going to be continued collaboration between the sheriff's office and IT to support that work, and to integrate either if they can manage it according to the standards required by our insurance company, or if Starla's team can manage the network piece, I think then we can do that. What I think is important about the security engineer position is right now that those responsibilities are being maintained by Starla, who is constantly moving and constantly doing about 4,000 things around here, and her other top team members that are really in charge of managing the network. So they're really kind of doing double duty, and security is a constant threat to us in a way that I didn't think it would be 10, 15 years ago in terms of those things. So it would allow us to have some expertise that is focused specifically on and monitoring security, and not have it to be number 437 on Starla's list of things to do that day.
We are getting hit on a regular basis. We have certain solutions that monitor that. And so it is important for us to have somebody that is checking those logs regularly instead of us sporadically.
When was the last time that we expanded capacity at IT?
I think the last time, I don't know. I mean, I think I don't even think we added a position when we went to the ERP. I think we added the position in the clerk's office in our office. So I don't think we've added an IT position in at least 5 to 6 years, but I could go back and get that for you. I think we could try to find that for you by Monday.
Okay, thank you.
Definitely not the last 3 years. Maybe I'm looking at Commissioner Kelly to remember, at least not the last past 4 years.
So far we can say it's been a while in a changing situation of
It's been
cyber
at least 8 years.
technology.
I think we had to work way
cybersecurity.
early in.
Okay. We've talked IT, questions for sustainability, maintenance, or administration?
I'll have a question for sustainability. So one of the positions, which is the Common Ground Program, is grant funded. Are all of the others funded through the county on a regular basis? I thought there were several that were either being supplemented with grants or entirely with grants.
Yes, the remainder are, sorry, the remainder are county funded. There was a food waste reduction analyst position that was grant funded. And that is how Jamie Hoffling came to our team. That grant did expire last year, and we were able to retain Jamie's talents toward the climate action plan.
We transitioned her to county funding at that time.
Okay.
And it was also the time that we did the split of sustainability from the city.
Are there currently other grants that are funding any of the work other than the Common Ground Program?
We are concluding a Partners for Places grant through the Urban Sustainability Directors Network, and that is going toward the open space planning process.
And then were there also ARPA dollars that went towards open space?
Yes, we do have the 2.7 million in ARPA that we are looking toward the plan recommendations that we can apply toward initial implementation.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
Can I switch gears? So in terms of the Housing and Human Services income revenues, the Affordable Housing Trust Fund had 350,000 in 2023. For 2024, is that we anticipate going through that grant process for it, or are those funds that are expected from the city?
I think they're applying to the grant.
Yeah. Okay.
We don't know yet.
All right. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it.
I think it's, do you want Jake to go take some pictures for you? You can have Jake. Yeah, Jake could go take pictures for you. Okay. I like making the new guy.
Jake likes us.
Okay.
Been here a little bit.
Yeah. Yes. So I get the pleasure of introducing our infrastructure team as well, commissioners. Chad Voigt and Tanya Voigt are here for Public Works and for zoning and codes. So a little bit just orientation to the how Public Works fund structure and where all their money is for everyone. There is a road and bridge fund that is the majority of Chad's operations. In addition to that, there are two small departments inside the general fund that are under Chad's supervision, and that is fleet maintenance and parks and vegetation. I'm going to talk first about the road and bridge fund, and then kind of just give you a little bit on the other two, and then we can talk about that. That's the most exciting stuff. The spoiler is that there are no changes to zoning and codes for their budget, so I don't have a whole lot to talk about there. So the Road and Bridge Fund, there's a slight increase to the mill levy of this fund. That mill levy amount was transferred from the general fund. I did that as a part of the proposed budget, and commissioners will see that as funded on the budget options tab that you have. It's around 115,000, which was specifically to fund additional asphalt related materials, which in their budget is a great little acronym called BM2. So we transferred a mill levy to do that. Actual expenditures fluctuate from year to year based on weather conditions and commodity prices. For example, oil prices impact the price of asphalt as well as delivery costs for heavy materials. The Road and Bridge Fund, there are no additional FTE planned in this budget nor the other two budgets in the general fund. The fund balance in the Road and Bridge Fund started 2023 at 25.3% or $2,363,942. We're planning to start 2024 at 23%, which would be $2,238,001. I feel like when we were going through this budget, Chad's team has been extremely tight in how they've approached cost increases in the Road and Bridge Fund. And I'd kind of like Chad to talk a little bit about the impact of that, and even, how maybe projects have been changed or delayed as a result of just cost increases on materials. Before we do that, the two, so inside the general fund, in fleet maintenance. So we have centralized fleet maintenance in Douglas County, which is why it's partially in the general fund. In 2022, the fleet began maintaining all of CFD number 1 equipment, which includes 27 heavy trucks and 7 pickups. Of those CFD 1 vehicles, they also utilize fuel from the shared KDOT Public Works fuel site. Revenue for all of 2022 was $44,551, and revenue for the first quarter of 2023 is already at $36,614. So there were some cost increases built in as a result of maintaining quite a large new increase to the fleet. But I just want to point out that CFD1 does pay the county for those expenses. There were some increases built into that budget related to inflation and cost of materials, and that is the same for parks and vegetation. And commissioners, that's all I have for an introduction. Chad, I don't know if there's anything specifically you want to talk about in terms of your budget and cost increases.
Sure. So you mentioned our materials costs and how that affects work, and the prime example of that is asphalt. And so initially we thought we might do a supplemental request for this, but we're going to, as Sarah said, just show it in the budget. And what we've had 2018 through 2022 was roughly $550,000 was our kind of running number for asphalt purchase. And then in 2023, it jumped, and then it jumped again. So over the last 2 years, we've seen a 29% increase in our budget line that we're requesting for asphalt. That is going against a 42% increase in the actual cost of material. So we're not asking to fully fund the cost increases we're seeing. We're asking to fund what we think is a reasonable amount to keep the work going at the level we think it should. So an example of that is when it jumped last year, we did 20% less work. And we just respond in the budget like that with things. So if we can't go buy asphalt, there's plenty of other work for that year that other folks, those folks can go work on. Just to be clear, this is asphalt that's used by county employees with county equipment. So we have a paving crew. 2-3 years ago, we bought a brand new paver, $350,000 machine. That gives us the ability to go out and patch long stretches of road. It's a really valuable part of our operations to be able to do that. Otherwise, we'd be contracting other things and additional things. So that's really the major change for us. Fuel, the story on fuel was really 2 or 3 years ago when we saw a huge increase. It's been level. Other things we're seeing, aggregates, rock, concrete, those things are affected by fuel. So they're sort of leveling off. The raw materials are sort of leveling off. It's really this asphalt that we're just seeing this, and I don't see it coming down. I don't think it'll return. I looked at a 12-year trend and I think we're actually in a correction. So I think we're where we're going to be. And that's just the reality. So other than that, the only increases in our budgets are personnel over the last couple of years. So everything else is flat. We don't have any supplemental requests. We don't have any new positions. So pretty basic, straightforward stuff.
So Chad, if material prices are starting to level off, what about contracted work? Is that still continuing to rise because of labor, or is that also leveling off?
It is, I think, leveling off. Contractors are saying the same things we're saying, that it's hard to find people. It's hard to hire people. Labor costs are going up. Supply chain issues are a challenge. In our world, if there's a supply chain issue, we can stop and go do something else. A contractor can't do that. They're obligated to perform at a certain time. And that's been very scary for some contractors, and that affected bid prices. And so I think they're starting to feel more comfortable. We got some good bids this year, and we're getting a lot of work done.
So previous, maybe 2022, had to hold off on some work because contractor bids weren't coming in a reasonable rate. So you think that 2023 is more productive because they're falling into line a little better?
Absolutely. This will all be visible when you see the CIP update. And we're having a huge year. We're doing $11.5 million in bid contracted work in this calendar year. So, almost $1 million a month in construction. And with January and February being fairly quiet, we're really in the heat of it right now. We're doing a lot of work. So yeah, part of that is from holding projects last year, and other parts of that are just the pile up after COVID, and a lot of things have affected us recently.
This is a tricky question, but I'd like to get some sense. You've held off on projects for cost reasons, for supply reasons. Do you have a sense? What's your comfort level right now that we're on? How good are we doing? Right. So if it's a scale of 10 is like, we're knocking it out versus, we're a little bit behind, but we'll catch up. Do you have a sense of that? I mean, we get emails about roads and bridges and things like that, but I'm sure you get more than we do, asking you to fix this or that. Have you seen an uptick since we've pulled back? I think that's our job, is to sort of honor your professionalism, but also make sure that we're giving you the funds that you need to make sure that safety and transportation are taken care of.
I think we're doing well. This is a continuation of many years of this approach, and we've planned well, and our paved roads are maintained at a pretty high level. We get a lot of compliments on our roads, especially our snow and ice removal. So, we're doing well, and I don't see the current economic factors and things eating into that. We're able to keep things at a good level of service. Where I would see that not true is in rock roads, and a lot of that goes to township budgets. And our rock roads are a challenge, and we're trying to do better, but township roads are where we get a lot of calls.
I would add when I just think about it from a financial perspective on this fund, you know, the mill levy increase in this fund went up the same amount that all the other county levied funds went up. Gas tax is flat. So, but at that rate, we couldn't keep up with the work. So, I needed to move a little bit, a mill levy over to sort of try to keep us. And we're not, it's to eat away at that 40% increase that his team has seen. So, and as you all know, this is, we had double-digit assessed valuation growth. So if we don't see relief in terms of inflation, which I'm not sure we're going to really see, and I don't envision the mill levy staying there, I think it is going to be a real challenge just moving forward on how do we maintain some of our infrastructure.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out, because I always think of your budget, Chad, is not really about this year, but thinking in about 5-year segments and what that looks like. And so I'm just, I appreciate the answer.
There's another piece of that too, that I should point out, our contracted pavement work. If you look for the last 5 years, it's the same number. We haven't moved that number. And that's on purpose. We really need to get a better handle on what that number should be and justify that. So constantly on the to-do list to get to that point where we can say, this is the justifiable amount to put into annual maintenance. It's $1.2 million right now. So I feel like, we've left it there on purpose. That may go up. And that's part of that longer term. And that's where we go out and do long mill and overlay projects. And those are the pieces that really keep us in good shape.
Just wanted a little clarification on the fleet maintenance revenue is that, and it's budgeted at 75,000. Is all of that CFD1, or do you have contracts with any other entities for fleet maintenance?
Right. There's a single entry for revenue for CFD1. It's shown as an offset of budget. The rest of the balance is general fund.
I actually have a question for zoning. I know you didn't have an increase, but I saw that your contractual services went way up. Maybe I misread that. And I was trying to think, is that around future renewable energy 47? Maybe I misread it. Yeah. Professional services. 14,000 was 4,200.
Yeah, so the supplemental request is for scanning, using maybe a part-time position or an internship or something like that to be able to take our huge conglomeration of paper. Sometimes when we're in public meetings and a county commissioner will say, what's the history on this TBU in the last 10 years? All of our paper documents have been filed by name historically in the past. So we need to go back, look at all the deeds, follow the deeds to the correct dates, and then pull the deeded property owner names. So it's extremely time intensive. In addition to that, they're all separated. So a conditional use permit's in a paper file, the building permits are in a separate paper file, violations are in a separate paper file. So to get a big picture about what's happened on a parcel, you're often spending 2 or 3 hours pulling paper files. So we would just like to kind of get a handle on getting everything in one place and under the parcel numbers so we can see the history of each parcel without quite so much manual work.
And Commissioners, I should have noted that on the cover sheet. So at the last minute, that was a supplemental request that I built into my proposed budget that it asked additional $10,000. And we should have noted it on the cover sheet that that's what it was for. So
You said supplemental, and I
See,
think we had this.
you didn't have a supplemental because I built it in.
Okay.
And I think I'm going to have her work with Starla and that team and try to figure out what's the best way to get this done. But yeah, there's so much paper there.
So that 10,000 is labor only. There's no other technology built in or anything like that.
I think we have the technology in-house from in Starla's budget to do that work. It's just a question of, do we hire someone to do it? Do we contract it out? What do we do in term? Because we've done both here. We've sent paper away to services that will scan it and index it for you. And then we've also hired staff or part-time staff, to come in and just do scanning. It's also a great job for people who are on work comp, need light duty. So we're going to explore a variety of options.
Well, I know Register of Deeds went through something similar in getting all of their records digitized. So I don't know if there's some kind of overlap or some things to be learned from their process. Or
They sent theirs all away and have a pretty substantial process. The appraiser's also looking into this. They have a substantial amount of paper files that we're really beginning to deal with.
We also have huge construction plans. We keep all of our commercial construction plans. And because of the size of those, you need a large plotter to be able to scan those in. That's pretty time intensive too. And we have thousands and thousands of those sheets that we need to get into a network. So we're not just housing so much paper everywhere.
Is there? Go ahead. So was a zoning director and now building codes director. It looks like one position was ended and another position is begun. Is that just a change of name? Is that a change of focus?
So it's a change of structure. So originally we had co-directors in this department. So now we have the zoning director and the chief building official. So it was the same number of FTE. There's a title change and the chief building official reports to Tanya.
And is that the position that's open currently?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
We're currently down 2 positions in that department. There's a combination building inspector that's sitting open and the chief building official.
Yeah, we have one full-time building inspector inspecting the county. Building permits are a little bit slow. So it's been a little bit of a blessing in disguise because our building permits are slow.
Okay, well, we await that CIP plan, but other than that, any other questions for Chad or Tanya?
Just in case anyone's listening or curious, so we'll have that CIP as a work session on your July 26th meeting at 4 o'clock. So we'll go through it in detail then.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that ends day 2 of the Douglas County budget hearings. Sarah, anything else for us before we adjourn? Commissioners, anything? Okay, we're adjourned.